Now, last week we had Are You OK Day. And why is it important to ask someone, are they okay? To discuss, I'm joined by psychology expert Dr. Jo Lukens. Good morning.
Good morning, Phil.
Can you explain to us what happens to our brain when we ask a question like, are you okay?
Well, it's one of the things that we find with any sort of meaningful conversation that we have with anyone, and the Are You OK example is such a good one, because what's actually found in some of the more recent research is that when you engage in a conversation such as that, there's actually an alignment of the brainwaves, and so we're not just exchanging words in these kinds of conversations, we're actually having almost like a neurological connection, if you like, between, say, you and I, if we're having a conversation about how we're going. So it's not just our empathy and our body language that maybe connects us, but it also seems that there's some connections there with our brainwaves.
What about chemicals in our brain? Oxytocin?
Oxytocin. We love oxytocin, don't we? So oxytocin, it sometimes gets called the trust hormone or the love drug. And often we find if you are in close physical proximity to someone that you care about for long enough, then it secretes oxytocin. And when that happens, we trust people more. And particularly when we engage in those positive social interactions like an Are You OK conversation, our brain does release oxytocin, which obviously means if I'm going to give you my honest answer, then I trust you. And so no surprises then to see that we actually get that chemical reaction that happens for us as well.
Is oxytocin a feel-good chemical, or is it? How can you describe what it's releasing?
It is. It's that feel-good. If you think about even for listeners now, if you think about someone that you care about and you hold that thought for a little while, your body will actually start to secrete oxytocin because it makes you feel good, which is like when you get a hug from a long lost friend, the same sort of effect happens. And that's certainly one of the things that we know that we seek. Interestingly, what also can happen is sometimes when we're stressed, the body can release oxytocin, which doesn't kind of make sense to us because we go, hang on, I'm stressed. But some of the suggestions is that then, it's your body's way of saying, hey, Joe, hey, Phil, go find someone. You need someone to connect to help you get through the stress. That's one of the thinkings around it, yeah.
Wow.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
That's very interesting. So we're basing all of this off the back of Are You OK? That question that we've been encouraged to ask, and not just on Are You OK Day. They're saying this year is Are You OK any day.
Absolutely.
So ask the question of someone any day. But some people, and I guess all people, myself included here, are sometimes hesitant to ask that question. Sometimes it's an important question and we don't know how to approach that person or how it's going to be received. Why do we hesitate before checking in on people?
Probably for a couple of reasons, but one of the things I think, there's two things that come to mind for me when you ask me that question. And one of them is that people get worried that they won't have capacity to deal with the answer. So, if you ask me if I'm okay and I say, no, Phil, I'm not, then all of a sudden you might feel like you need to manage or solve that, when what we actually know is, I don't need you to manage or solve it, I just need you to listen to me, So often people worry about what the answer is going to be and they're not going to have the skills to deal with it, and I think that's one of the important things for us to remember, is just to be there for someone is one of the most healing things you can do for somebody else. And the other thing is that we know that humans tend to have almost like an overestimation bias as to how awkward or unpleasant a conversation is going to be. So often when you think about, okay, this afternoon I'm going to ask Phil how he's going, I noticed yesterday he didn't seem okay, my anticipation of that is I actually build it up to be much worse than it actually is. And when I finally get around to the conversation, people say, it was actually easier than I thought. I just said, hey, Phil, I noticed yesterday you didn't seem yourself. Are you okay? And then we go into the conversation, it's much more comfortable. So I think sometimes our anticipation is the thing that gets in the way for us, I think.
It's sometimes an automatic reaction. Hey, Joe, how are you? Yeah, good, thanks. Is there any tips on, if we really want to know how someone is going, and we think that they're struggling, but, it's that automatic, yeah, good, thanks. Is there a tip on finding out if they are okay? Yeah,
I think there's a couple of things that we can do. So the phrasing of the question will be important. So, hey, Phil, how are you? That lends itself to I can say, and many parents picking up children in cars this afternoon will probably get the same thing. How was your day? Good. Yeah. So which is different to, tell me about your day. which is a more open question. So open questions can be one thing that can help us get to a more meaningful conversation, making sure we've got time in the conversation as well. So, if we're passing on the street, then we may not have time to stop, whereas, if we're sitting down and having a cup of coffee, we've got a bit more time there. And then the other thing is you're asking the question for a reason. So if you're wondering, maybe Joe's not okay, you're wondering that for a reason. So maybe you can bring some of that with you into the conversation. Hey, Joe, I noticed yesterday that you seemed a bit distracted and whatever else it might be that you noticed. And then that might help open up the conversation. So it's not like you're just making it up.
What impact is social media having? Because I notice when I'm typing away on Messenger or text message, my conversations are very different to like a conversation we're having now.
Yeah.
What impact is that having?
A significant one. So we know we lose the complexity and the richness of you and I sitting down and having a conversation. But it's not that simple, is it? Because I have more conversations now with relatives overseas than I would have if I didn't have social media.
Yeah.
So it is a tool of connection. But I guess what I always say to people is to have a think about how you're left feeling. Most people will talk about feeling worse when they come off social media than when they went on it. So that's an indicator to you that we don't want social media to be our only form of connection, because just by the immediacy of it and it's so quick, is it by default then isn't a very deep conversation.
Dr. Joe, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Psychology expert there, Dr. Joe Lukens, having a chat about just how hard it can be to ask that question, that all-important question, are you okay, and what happens when we do ask that.